Ask Me Anything question. זה שאל כפי יכולתך in Hebrew. So for those of you that do not know our speakers, we have Avishai, J. Paul, and Sabine. And Avishai and J. Paul are consultants for many, many years. I personally know Avishai. That's the first thing I did when I was hired to a startup is call him, and then we're still going over your notes, and and Sabine is an expert in training and consulting of communication best practices. And I can also tell you that Avishai and J. Paul Reed, most of their job is like, do we need a load balancer? And then they say yes, and you also need to do something about your culture, right? So they're all experts in, in somewhere in the gray area of what is DevOps. So you get for free consulting, which usually would cost you a lot of money, I know. And so, and we also have 5 notebooks for the first best 5 questions. So just fire ahead. We have a mobile microphone somewhere. So just raise your hand and we'll...
What, are you kidding me? Somebody ask something.
This is a high trust environment, so don't be afraid to ask any question at all.
So why my ball doesn't count?
One what? Right. So I asked Avishai that in the intermission 2 intermissions ago, and he gave me an answer, and I wish you could repeat it. It would be awesome. The question is, I have a client who knows he needs to test. He even bought his own testing platform, and knows he needs to do something. He even bought his own platform to do it. But now that he realized how much work it is, he doesn't want to use it, and we can't really work without it. Our relationship suffers because of that. So I would like to ask all 3 of you, what would you do in that case, where you have that cultural difference, and you want to reintroduce to the client why he made that, to remind him why he made that culture choice.
I really want to hear an answer for that one.
That's good. The question.
So I'll give you the use case. The user wanted to have a testing platform. We introduced the testing platform, and now we have a bug in the system, and he wouldn't build a test for it, so we can't work it.
So
the name of the client? No.
So if I got this correctly, you have a client, he wrote a program, he wrote some tests for it. Yeah. He has a bug, but is not willing to write a test for that bug.
Right.
Okay, and you can't convince him to do that.
Yeah, and so we can't solve the bug because we don't have a test that fails. It's all anecdotal.
Yeah, I don't know.
Because that's what we did the last 3 times, and it becomes a problem. Now it's a problem.
So the interesting thing about that particular case is they already bought in, the client already bought into the testing framework. They paid money for it. So there's something else going on there, to my mind, about why they're on board, right? You didn't have to sell them on that. As a weird example, so I'm going to give you the consultant answer if it depends. I don't know, right? But I will tell you this: a lot of times, and I've started paying more attention to sort of the dynamics of things. I was working with a client once, and this is kind of very client specific, so we can talk about things that aren't consultant related. But there was a particular tool, and it was a startup. They were very happy with it. I was working with them on it, and then they hired a manager and a new mid-level manager, and that manager came in, and the way that manager established themselves was to rip everything out and put in their own thing, because that's the way they were I am the now alpha manager and managing this team, and look how much I'm doing. Now, what was interesting to me about that particular thing is before it was a CI/CD type situation. Before the code commit would go in once and you'd get a build out the end. When he bolted the stuff on without talking to anyone, just to show how smart he was, they were doing something like the same commit got built 8 times. because he didn't talk to anyone, so he was replicating work that was being done. So the point of that story is that I would imagine there's something else going on. Maybe for that client, it's like there's something related to their focus, so they aren't caring as much about testing because maybe they're worried about metrics or something like that. So I look for what else, because you already sold them on it, so there's something else going on.
Yes. Yeah. Yes, I think the problem is somewhere else, and the only thing you can do is really talk honestly about what's going on, honestly what you think about it, where you have your problem and what you feel about the situation, and ask why they act this way, and try not to stop asking questions, and listen very well. Listen what is beyond the simple words, and try to ask beyond those words.
One quick thing I'd add to that is that I like your point about keep asking, because one of two things will happen. They hired you for a reason. If you keep asking, they will stop returning your phone calls and emails, which means it's a proxy for we don't want to work with you anymore, which as a consultant happens for lots of different reasons. But if they still sort of engage, but in weird ways, that gives you a lot of information too. I mean, I've seen a lot of like, you don't really fire a consultant, but they're just like, here's your last thing, and then you can't get anyone to reply to your emails, and you're like, okay, well, yeah.
Do you communicate via email, via phone, or face to face? What do you do?
We use mostly email and Skype, and when I get a chance, I just drop in their office and open their
Yeah.
on their project.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, that's very important.
Okay, so since I got 3 consultants on the same stage, so I would like to know if ever in your consulting career have you given like a bad advice or an advice that you like regret giving later, and what was the ramifications?
All my advice is awesome.
I can't even begin to count the number of bad advices that I gave over the years. I'm not going to choose one. That would be cheating. So here's the fact of life. We can't always get the right things, and we don't always know in advance. And everybody, everywhere will do some mistakes sometime. And this is a fact of nature. I mean, you can't go around it. So it's a fact of life, and you have to remember it. The problem is that in many cases, your clients expect perfection, because they're like, hey, we paid you that many dollars per hour. How come you got it wrong? You're a bad consultant. Are you? No, you're not a bad consultant. You did your best. You bring whatever experience and knowledge you have to the table, and that's what they're paying for. They're not paying for absolute knowledge because it doesn't exist. And, maybe one of their employees could have done the job, and maybe we would have done better or not. So you never know, and this is a risk you have to take and something you have to live with it. If your clients are grown-ups, and we all hope that they understand this. If they don't understand this, it's your job to explain. And ultimately, it's about trust. If your client trusts you, if you build trust with them, then they trust that over time they will get results.
I would say, because I don't think all my answers are awesome, or perfect, I should say. They're all awesome, but not perfect. The mistakes that I've made generally tend to be around, I provided a technical solution that I've seen work for other teams, but I didn't understand the people dynamics and the team dynamics and the system dynamics with the actual humans doing the thing. And so it turns out that the technical solution that worked for 3 companies in a row before them doesn't work for this company because their team is structured slightly differently, or it turns out that the lead from team A doesn't literally does not like the lead from team B. And in other situations, those teams worked swimmingly together. So the technical solution was fine. So that's just for me, coming up with better heuristics as a consultant for like that solution won't work for those set of people. And then, the best relationships you can go and say, I see you're having a lot of trouble and I don't know why, because this has worked before for other teams. So let's work on that together. And I find that if you frame it that way, as in I can give you all the situations that it's worked, and I'm trying to parse why it's not working for you, they appreciate that. Because consultants get a bad rap when they're like, there's this one solution, it's the only solution, and they keep trying to ram it down your throat, even clearly it's not working. So I think that my clients, at least when I made mistakes like that, they appreciate that I have, owned up to the fact that. And also one last thing, I actually had a client where about halfway through the contract, it was like, this isn't, and it was like a 6-week contract. I was like, you're not getting any, I'm not providing you value, and we're not kind of working well together. So I don't want you to pay me anymore, and I'm not going to do any more work, and we'll do a nice kind of tie-off, but we didn't finish the project. And that was kind of uncomfortable, but I think it was the best solution for both of us. And with it was kind of communication issues with the client. They were hard to get a hold of. In fact, it was through email, and that was when I should have used the phone, and I didn't.
Okay, I'm working with people and on a very personal topic, and I don't give advice. I just give feedback. I show up possibilities, what you could change, but my clients have to decide themselves what they want to change. And I help them to reflect their position and their way of behavior. So it's a process that after my job, they are able to reflect themselves and to try to improve themselves and do not need help all the time, just in special situations. And so I think I don't give really advice. I try to be some kind of a mirror. And you can see yourself and decide, what do I want? How do I want to behave? How do I want to impress others? And then I show possibilities how to achieve these goals. But these possibilities are very individual because they have to match to the person. So.
Okay, so a friend of mine working for a company, a joke. So we have a problem with explaining developers why they need to write tests. Okay, so it's not in common practice. They're thinking they're not writing bugs. The code is running from the first iteration. And this problem is like, it's starting from up bottom. So it's not just developers, it's team leaders that believes it's not so important. So for example, we can write the code and only then write tests for this code, not just in time. And it's kind of hard to us to understand how to initiate this process so they will push back business in right places to provide the time for making this happen. So if you have any experience to explain how to do it right or any experience in this field.
So that's actually a very big problem in many places. And it's not only tests, it's a lot of other stuff. First of all, over the years, we've built a very bad culture of developers segregating their jobs to stuff that they'd like to do and stuff that they don't like to do. Like tests is a part of development, but it's a part that they don't like to do. So suddenly it's not their job. And we played along with it. And in some companies, we allowed them, the luxury of doing only the stuff that they like. And now it became a problem. And how do you get rid of this problem? That's a very long process of retraining everybody. So the first thing that you have to do is to show them the value of tests. And that's a very delicate thing because you have to start momentum. So you have to write some tests that show people that there is value there to get them to try it. Then when they try it, hopefully they have a good experience with it, and over time it builds momentum. So it's a very delicate thing. You can't force people to write tests because then they would be against it. So you have to first do it yourself and showcase why it's good, then get them to try it, and then over time they will start adopting it if they see the benefit. Sometimes you have to, get them. You have to show them. You have to get their attention and show them. You see that test that you wrote 2 weeks ago that caught a bug, so they see the value. Sometimes you have to help them see the value, But again, it's a very delicate thing. And ultimately, if you don't get buy-in from management, if they don't see the importance of that, then as a consultant, it's very hard for you to achieve this, because this is something that have to come from within the culture of the company and from the leadership of the company. If the leadership doesn't care, there's only so much you can do.
So yeah, I'd echo that. I think a lot of times companies want the DevOps, right? Management wants the DevOps because they read about it, so they want it. And really, it comes down to the reason your competitors shipping faster than you are is because they wrote tests and they did configuration management, they did all these things. And so from a management perspective, it's actually that connection between the reason you aren't succeeding in the marketplace with the metrics that you like, or because it's sort of you didn't eat your vegetables, right? It's time to eat your vegetables and write your tests. I don't do a lot of space in like testing and consulting, but I'll give you an example that came up in sort of an operations space. It was a conversation that a friend of mine actually had, and he was trying to convince, it was actually him, he was the ops manager, and he was talking to the dev manager, and he was trying to convince them to sort of instrument their code so it was operable. In other words, when a alert fired at 3 a.m., his engineers could do something. So there's a lot of on the development side about, do developers carry the pagers and that sort of thing. And so the dev manager is pushing back, like, I don't want to carry the pager. I mean, we've hired you guys to do this stuff. I don't want to be responsible for that because I don't want to be woken up at 3 a.m. And the critical moment there, the learning moment, was the ops manager said, my people don't either. And there was that realization on the dev management side that doing things around operability, so that might be tests, it might be logging statements that are actionable, it might be monitoring, setting up monitoring hooks into the larger system, was a benefit for them. So that was sort of to your point, that the aha moment. You got to have that moment, and whether it's showing a test that popped 2 weeks later that saved their butts, it oftentimes comes in these flashes, that flash of realization that you can't plan for.
What you describe contains a lot of problems, I think. One problem is leadership, as you said. One problem is culture. One problem is responsibility. And another huge problem is changing things I have always done this way, and now I should work in another way. That's very hard. We have to leave your comfort zone. And nobody wants to leave his comfort zone just because someone says this, yeah. And to convince somebody to leave the comfort zone needs a lot of work, and it needs a lot of good examples. And for me, if you want to establish a change in a team, it's very important that the team lead is a good example and shows that a change is possible. And what comes out of the change, not only out of the change for the company, but out of the change for each single person. And another question is, do they really feel responsible for the company's success? Or are they just going to work to earn their money and go home and leave everything? So the part of culture, am I really a part of the company? Do I feel as a company? That's all very important for the process of change.
One more thing I want to say that I think that all those questions revolve around is that this is not the job of consultants. Change has to be led by someone from within the company. When a consultant is advocating change, he's an external agent. This creates animosity within the company, and is not well accepted, not as well as when somebody from within advocates it. If somebody from within advocates it, then he owns it, he is responsible, and it's his prerogative and right to advocate that change. You as a consultant, you don't have that right. You don't wake up with you don't carry the pager, you don't suffer the results, you're not going to lose your job if the company goes out of business. So I don't think you should expect those things from consultants. You should try to find somebody within the company to lead that change.
So, question. If I remember correctly, it was last year we had the T-shirt for the DevOps days was breaking silos, if I remember correctly. So we're breaking the silos between developers and operations. My question, and sometimes worries or fears, is that we're creating a new silo called DevOps. Would be interested in hearing your thoughts on that one, yes or no, and what we need to do to make that not happen.
So you create like a new silo. There's actually a lot of people thinking about this now that the silo metaphor is actually not a particularly good one. And in fact, from managing the complexity of your system, both organizational and technical, there's a reason silos exist, and they're not on their face just evil. And so I think a lot of times when we shorten DevOps to breaking down silos, that's kind of the sweet candy version of DevOps. It's the easy to understand part of it. By the way, you don't see enterprises breaking down all their silos. Like, that's just not how they're doing it. And people may be laughing and saying, well, enterprises don't get it. There are some really good counter examples of really large organizations that are keeping what we would consider silos, but they're changing how they do the work, and they're changing how those groups of people communicate and how they cross-pollinate. And that's just as successful from a DevOps perspective as, sort of breaking down the silos. So in some sense, actually, there's this concern that if we just wreck the silos, and you see GIF images of corn, grain silos being blown up, like that's just as dangerous than having the silo in the first place, because in some sense, you're creating this chaos and then hoping it'll work out, right? So I just think that's sort of a pop culture-y version of it. It's actually a more delicate, more deliberate, more measured process than just breaking down the silos. Although it sounds great and it looks good on a T-shirt.
I like.
Yeah, no, I have. I'm not.
It's an awesome T-shirt. You actually have two problems. One problem is parallelization of work, and the other one is how to spread the knowledge. So the problem with parallelization of work is that in a lot of places, the DevOps team, whatever you want to call it, is probably on the critical path of many projects. So it becomes a bottleneck in terms of work for everything in the company. And no matter how much you scale it, it's still going to be the bottleneck. So you want to solve that problem somehow. And this is one of the reasons why you shouldn't have a DevOps team in that sense, because you're creating a bottleneck. So you have to split it either to many groups or just spread the work to many developer teams, or however you want to do it. It's not a matter of silos, it's just a matter of, I don't know what you call it, project management or whatever. That's one problem. The second problem is how you spread the knowledge, because right now you have a lot of knowledge that those people hold, again, no matter how you call them, whether it's how to use Linux properly, how to do networking, storage, whatever it is. And somebody has to have that knowledge within the company, and other people need to use that knowledge and utilize it. So the solution to both problems in many cases, and again, this is not, no solution would fit all problems on all companies, is to take this group of people and turn them into internal consultants. You can have a DevOps group as long as they don't touch production. They just teach other people how to do it. Don't have a group that knows that operates Chef, have them teach other people how to do Chef.
I would add really quick. So a common pattern you see happening, it's not just operations. You see it in release engineering, you see it in QA. You see this migration of hiring people to do the thing, so test the software or release the software or operate the servers, to groups that are building tools that do the thing. So release engineers build a continuous delivery pipeline. QA builds test frameworks that the developers then plug into, right? The DevOps team, which is an operations team, they're doing things like maybe internal cloud or compute resources that developers can use, and maybe they're sort of managing the servers, but the servers are connected to the continuous delivery pipeline. So they don't really care what comes off the pipeline. They just make sure the servers are running and available, right? So I think in that regard, that's kind of the internal consulting thing. It's like we're moving to a service-oriented model for that work, which is a real shift from I was a release engineer. I used to sit there and release the code, and that's not what you see large-scale organizations or even small-scale ones that are quote-unquote doing DevOps doing anymore. It's like those people write tools that let the business, maybe that's developers, maybe that's actually operations people, do the thing on demand on the schedule they need to meet their commitments.
Too, and want to build up the perfect showcase for PR? Or do they run DevOps because they are convinced that DevOps is the best thing for them? In the whole range, not only the tools, not only the fast production, also the philosophy which is concerning the people in DevOps. And when you drive DevOps because you are convinced that it is the best method for your company, for your team, I think then silos or walls are no longer a topic, because that's the very essential of DevOps. Bring down the walls between different departments, and so when you are convinced that DevOps is the right thing, you won't have this problem.
Okay, so less optimistic question. I suspect that DevOps brings with it also a new challenge, which is distributing the germ of burnout across all teams. So first of all, how do you think it's possible to inoculate against it? That's one thing. And the second thing is another sickness of DevOps, is the hero syndrome. How do you deal with people who already have it?
Wow, those are tough ones.
I have been on DevOps Days Amsterdam, and there was one of the well-discussed topics was well-being in tech. And the part of burnout in tech industry is not only in DevOps there, but I think the question of culture, of talking with each other, of going into different departments and trying to solve problems together is a very important thing to feel a lot better in your work.
So I would point you to Jennifer Davis has a presentation called From Hero to Zero, where she talks about hero culture and actually going to, I don't know if she calls it zero culture, but this idea that like heroes are bad. She talks a lot about sort of the problem you're talking about and how you actually get people to stop sort of being heroes in their particular organization. So I would watch that. I know it's online somewhere. Burnout is certainly a big issue. I don't think it's actually DevOps specific. I think you were kind of asking around, DevOps makes it spread, right? The whole developers carrying pagers sort of thing. And so how do you kind of deal with that? That is a hard one. I hate to beat the drum of it's a cultural issue. I actually think in a lot of cases, organizations that are sort of fighting burnout deliberately have it turns into sort of an economic and people management issue, not really right. And so that's actually a different conversation than DevOps, right? And you saw this before, actually. Again, as a release engineer, I was burned out, and the reason that that was a big thing is a couple things. The release engineers could never say no, I'm not going to work on a Friday, right? And so that was problem A. And problem B was release engineering was not seen as anything that really added value. It's just something you had to do. So they never staffed it appropriately. They never, did that appropriately. So the nice thing about the DevOps shift a little bit is if you are responsible for building a continuous delivery pipeline and not actually doing the thing, then you sort of can actually mitigate it structurally, because then if you have sort of a stable continuous delivery pipeline, then you can commit code whenever you want, and it should just percolate through the system without a person being involved. And then, of course, you might be saying, well, then we're shifting that to the developers, right? And that, again, becomes like, how do you manage your people? And then are you doing things like, I see a lot of bastardization of Agile, where the conversation is supposed to be the development team they do the whole planning poker process, and they're supposed to be able to say, no, that's what we can do in this sprint. And somehow that gets bastardized to the product manager or the product owner saying, I want these 5 features in this sprint, figure it out, right? And that's sort of, again, that's not a DevOps specific thing. It's a sort of the way we manage that process. And it is, if you talk, you do any Agile conferences or talk to Agile people, that's not the way it's capital A Agile. It's not the way that's supposed to be. There's supposed to be a mechanism where the developers say, we are committing to get this done, but only this amount. So.
The way I see it, it has the same mechanism as an addiction, basically. So like when you start thinking about why certain people get to ops, is because they like it. They're adrenaline addicts, basically. They like the feeling of being needed. They like the feeling of being called to rescue everything and everybody. They like, yeah, of course. They like basically the flames. They like the adrenaline. Okay, we're adrenaline junkies, basically. And this starts a cycle of addiction because like developers, what they like most of the time, like a lot of other people, they like, the free time, for example. So it feeds itself, basically. And it's the same with what do you call it, full gas in neutral that we have here in Israel. Like everybody works crazy hours and the results are shitty because the code that you write at 1 o'clock a.m. is full of bugs, basically. So you don't really achieve anything by it, but it self-perpetuates. Because then you come to the office the next day and you see somebody leaving at 4 o'clock and it's like, oh yeah, you're doing half day now, eh? So it self-perpetuates. So it's an addiction and you have to fight it like you fight any other addiction. You have to detox.
Yeah, I'll just mention that it's really interesting. There's a push right now where it's talking about job description. They're like, we work hard and we play hard and blah. And it's like, no, I want to work at a reasonable pace and I want to go home at 5. Yeah, and so here's the thing though, culturally, if you have in fact, you see this, Pivotal is a great example. They expect everyone in the office by 9 and everyone goes home at 6. And the entire company does that. And when you leave, right? That's the way that they structure their work, right? And so that is, again, that's an economic, that's a business, that's a management thing that says we think that's more important than replacing our entire staff every year because we have a rolling of 2 engineers leave every year because we just burnt them to a crisp. Yeah, there are companies that do that. In fact, if you've got different zones, depending on what it is, like if it's an ops context, that's even better. There's actually no reason that the people in the different time zones should be working their evenings because you've got coverage in Ireland or Bangalore, or I'm naming places where those teams happen to be co-distributed. But
Hi. So I'm glad you brought up the whole working methodologies and mindset because I wanted to ask about in the whole DevOps realm, a lot of the tasks are proactive, like you're planning or implementing something new, improving your environment, but a lot of the tasks are you're just reacting to something, which makes it a bit different, difficult to plan out your work and follow agile work methodologies. So I was wondering if you've seen companies that do that really well, that they plan out their sprints and still incorporate the new stuff and maintenance, if you will.
Are you talking in the context of an operations team or a DevOps team?
Yeah, well,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Are you familiar with Kanban? Kanban, yeah. So the teams that I see doing really well use Kanban to track their work. They don't do Agile because if you tell a VP, well, we can't fix the site that is currently down until our sprint is over, that's not going to fly. So the reason I really like Kanban for this is that it instead of time boxing the work, it illustrates the flow of work. And so it makes it easy to have the conversation around the reason you're not getting any of the new, shiny, flashy, good, like new stuff done is because we are doing so much firefighting that you can clearly see the work is coming in through the firefighting channel on the Kanban board. and all of the work that we thought we were going to get just gets piled up, right? And it's visually, it's very easy to see. So the thing is that allows you to then have the conversation. If you would like more fancy, fun projects, we need to maybe hire more people. We need to put more people on that team. And by the way, the people who've been firefighters, let them do the fun stuff. And actually, well, the reason the firefighting stuff is great training for the people coming in, as long as you don't immediately burn them to a crisp too. But so the point is, all of the orgs that I can think of that are doing it very well in an ops context are using Kanban, because that changes the focus from the sprint to the flow of work, and that facilitates conversations around, do you have two ops people trying to support 200 developers? Like, that's not going to work out well for you. So they can fix it that way.
So I don't think that there's a big difference in that regard between ops teams and development teams, because like the ultimate goal of Agile is flexibility. And the cycle of work that you have in Agile, maybe 3 weeks or 2 weeks, doesn't matter, but the cycle is the same. You look at production, you get feedback, you see a problem or something that you think you could do better, and you go and fix it or make it better. It's not really different than what we do in ops. The only difference is that it's shorter time frames. And even in the context of development teams, you still have work that is unexpected. Maybe somebody found a bug and then suddenly you have to fix it. It's still unexpected work and unplanned work. So in operations, part of what you can do is you can segment your team to people. You have one lane for unexpected work that you keep like off the board. And this is a person or persons who are available like immediately for anything that happens. Maybe it's an emergency or somebody just popping into your office and says, "Can you help me?" For whatever it is. And you can do the same in your development teams as well. You just keep some of your capacity for unexpected events. The real problem, yeah. So you should probably save more than 20%. So that's. The real problem here is that a lot of the jobs that we do, even in development or anywhere else, is not actually on the board. It's not in any ticket. It's not written anywhere. So if you plan your capacity for 100% or 80% of what's on the board, you're already over capacity.
This will be our last question.
So I will just add one thing to that. So I've seen a lot of teams do that, and if you have a really disciplined team, they can get away with it. Part of the problem, though, is people start to game that. They're like, well, you've got 30% capacity. This feature is really important, right? And so the hurdle that I've seen with that is people carve out the time and they think they can predict the future, as opposed to having a conversation about reality. It could be that in a particular operations context, everything went down and 100% of your quote-unquote capacity went to firefighting. And so I just like the fact that we're talking about reality, not trying to plan that we're carving out time for one person when maybe the whole team gets yanked. By the way, did you have anything to add to that? Okay.
Although there are no notebooks left, I'm still going to ask the question. I'll be fine. What's your take on the knock versus no knock debate?
On the what?
Knock.
Sure.
Yeah. Knock is bullshit. There, I said it. Knock is bullshit. I'm going to say it again. If you have a knock, then A, you're doing it wrong. B, you're lying to yourself.
So is that a big debate here? I didn't know that was a debate. And I don't mean that flippantly. So, right. So, well, actually, to make sure. So you're talking about like network operations center, like a data center versus all cloud?
No. Everyone does operations. We have dedicated teams 24 hours. Network operations center.
Oh, like a NOC center. Oh. Okay. I don't know that I have an opinion on that. I think it is dependent on, like most things, this is a very consultant answer, it's dependent on your context. I know that Netflix, in fact, Arup and I were talking about this, got rid of their NOC, and that was a big transition for them, and they replaced it with kind of, they call it business insight, and they tackled it differently. I will say this. I have seen large companies that have a NOC, and it's because the NOC is in this weird siloed thing. So they deal with a bunch of stuff that operations, because NOC in their world is different than operations. So they are like another silo, and then you see all the problems, right? So if you integrated them, right, they wouldn't have that problem. So my point is that I know there are big companies that have a NOC and it works swimmingly, and they have integrated that quote unquote silo with all the others, and it works fine. And by the way, we're talking about the scale of Facebook, so you know, and I'm not saying Facebook does this, I don't actually know, but for them it makes sense to sort of have kind of a more overall eye on what's going on, but they may pull in people or whatever. So I think it's dependent on whether or not you think you can do it well as an organization, whether or not you have the data to show that you can do it well, and also whether or not it's serving you well. I mean, in the Netflix case, they got rid of the NOC because it's all in Amazon now, so like why would you have one? So I would say it's context dependent. I don't tend to have really huge opinions on a lot of things, except if you provide more context. So if you're like, we're a 10-person startup, should we have a NOC? Then yeah, probably not. But if you're, Facebook or Google, maybe it makes sense for them to have a NOC. Yeah.
I'm going to elaborate my answer a bit. I've never seen a NOC that justified its cost. Never, ever.
I've seen a lot of broken NOCs.
They have regulation. They have to have a NOC. It's not a technical. It's not an engineering issue. It's a regulatory issue. It's completely different. But if you're asking me as an engineer, I've never seen a NOC that justified its cost. Never.
Thank you very much. Put your hands together for these 3 awesome people. And now let's loosen it up and get a beer and just hang out.